Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our workshop on going with your gut and the resolution of digestive problems. This is a big issue for many people, and this is not going to be just your same old digestion talk. What I want to share with you tonight is the cutting edge and the results that I've been getting right here in the practice. What are the unique and specific approaches that we use to get the results that we do get? And I think we need to recognize that there's a lag between what the forefront of scientists are showing us and teaching us and the conventional models that most people are using. So I want to share that with you so you also can see a resolution and get to the cause of what these digestive problems are rather than just masking them. I want to give you an example. A young woman came into our practice and she was an athlete and she struggled with digestive problems. She had gas, bloating, and SIBO, GERD. So, and just to recognize the significance of it, you know, a lot of people with digestive problems, they don't talk about it because it can be embarrassing. And this poor young woman, she was embarrassed by the gas and the odors that would come from her body that she couldn't control. I mean, just imagine that. And so she, over a few months, her health transformed and her digestive problems went away. And that was because she followed the protocols that we had recommended. And she not only noticed an improvement in her digestive symptoms, but she also noticed her energy levels came up and her athletic performance improved as well. So I hope that this is something that can help all of you that are watching. If you're watching, it's because you yourself have concerns, or maybe you know somebody that does, a loved one. So please, whatever information you get from this webinar that is valuable, please share it with your friends and family so that they can get the help they need too. And let's just recognize that digestive problems are a concern, but they are a subset concern over a bigger concern we have in our whole country. How many of you out there would agree with me that our country has a health crisis happening? That there are so many people that are struggling with chronic health issues, including digestive problems. And so I know that this crisis can come from many reasons. Tonight, you're going to see what the reasons are for digestive problems, but I want you to understand that some of these reasons are the same reasons that we have an overall health crisis in our country. So keep that in mind as we go through this. And I want to give you some stats here. Did you know that 70 million Americans are struggling with digestive issues? 70 million. And that means that would be about 1 in 15. No, wait a minute. My math is wrong. That's 1 in 5. 1 in 5 have digestive concerns. Think of the people that you know who are struggling with digestive concerns. Some of you may not know, again, because people don't always talk about it because it can be embarrassing for them. So if you know 50 people, 10 of them have digestive concerns. Now, I know that when I start to bring up statistics, many times people's eyes, they glaze over and they get overwhelmed by it and they just say, oh, just let somebody else do it. But I'm not going to let you get away with that tonight, because when we think of these statistics, again, it's not nameless, faceless people. It's people right here in our community that these numbers are coming from. You know, maybe it's a friend, a family member, a neighbor, a coworker, right? People that you know. So take this information and please share it with them, because it could create a pivot point for them where they've been searching for a solution and didn't know that there actually are answers for them. All right, so now that we have kind of covered the basics, let's now jump into what we're going to be covering tonight. And remember that, again, it's not going to be your same old digestion talk. We're going to cover some of the anatomy, physiology basics that you need to understand if you want to understand what the cause of these problems are. But I'm also going to zero in on the most common concerns that I find. Now, we have one of the largest wellness clinics in the area. And so I pretty much see what is out there. And the common things that people struggle with tend to be things like acid reflux or GERD, but also inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's, celiacs, and chronic constipation as well. So that whole digestive tract, I see these issues. So we're going to take a look at what the causes of these things are in detail and what solutions may work for folks. But first, let's just recognize that digestive problems, I'm going to just move our slides along here. Bear with me for a sec while I get this going. There we go. So just remember that the digestive concerns are a symptom, but we think of symptoms as body signals. So this is just one topic in a whole series we do on, we call it the Body Signals Program, that are condition specific and the solutions to those concerns. So let's recognize that symptoms are body signals, meaning that it's your body's way of asking for help. And so depending on what you do with that signal is going to determine your outcome. Now, in our culture, many people are taught that if a symptom shows up, just do whatever you can to take care of that symptom. And so there can be some confusion on how you get to the outcomes you want if you are interpreting the symptoms in the wrong way. What I mean by that is that symptoms themselves are actually not the problem. They are the communication about the problem. And many times the symptoms are simply what's at the tip of the iceberg, right? The symptoms are what are showing, but they may be a sign of a much bigger problem that is underlying. And so depending on how we approach this, if we consider the symptoms as a signal from our body, that it's a understanding the language that our body is speaking to us, and we respond to it, asking ourselves, what do I need to change? Then we're going to be going in the right direction. So I truly believe that if patients know more about how their body works and understand the mechanisms, then they'll take better care of them. So that's why I want to spend some time and unpack this with you today so that I can teach you how to speak body, how to understand the signals that your body is giving you, and not to confuse the symptoms with the cause. Right? Really, if we're going to get resolution, we have to go to what the cause of these symptoms are, and the symptoms versus the problem, right? So the symptom, digestive issues, if that becomes the problem, then the goal is simply to make the symptoms go away. But if your objective is to live a healthier life and you understand that digestive symptoms are a signal that your body's giving you, telling you you are moving away from health, then we want to recognize what do we need to do to correct our function so that we can come back to living that healthy lifestyle and getting the healthy outcomes that we would get from that. So again, now let's just unpack this idea of symptoms so we can really understand this. This is a diagram that comes from a study that was done multiple times in the 70s and the 80s, even in 2004. And what they did is they surveyed a large group of people, and they found that there was a whole range to where these people lie on this continuum. So at the left-hand side, we see people having earlier death. On the right-hand side, we see high levels of wellness. And then in between, we see a whole range. And so what they discovered from this study is that there were 3 zones here. Everybody's going to be somewhere on this continuum, but there's going to be 3 zones. There's going to be the sick zone. There's going to be the not sick zone in the middle, and then the healthy zone on the right-hand side. Right? Did you hear that? Many people think I'm either healthy or unhealthy, as if it's a switch, an on-off switch. But actually, there's a range here. And the thing that is most important here is the middle range, which is called the not sick zone. Very different from high-level wellness. And yet the problem that I see over and over again is that there are many people that are calling the not sick zone the healthy zone. And so they are thinking of themselves as healthy just because they don't have symptoms. So you can see where the symptoms fall here. So if you already are having symptoms, that is your body telling you what direction you're heading. You are already heading, a third of the way down towards earlier death, right? So the symptoms are important because they tell us in what direction we're heading. And that was one of the other things they discovered from this study, was that not only is everybody somewhere on this continuum, but everybody's going to be moving in one direction or the other with varying speeds as well. Some people are moving very fast in the wrong direction. Some are moving very slowly in the wrong direction, and then every combination in between. And so many times the first job that we have in our practice is to slow down the momentum going in the wrong direction, turn the corner, and start getting people moving in the right direction. So ultimately our goal is to get everybody that comes into the practice moving towards that higher level of health that they want. So now that you understand this, I want you to recognize that not understanding this could be one of the problems that's getting in the way of you getting the goals that you want, right? So if you want to just mask the symptoms, you could actually effectively do that with a medication, but you may still be moving in the wrong direction towards disability, where you get to the point where you can't fix the symptom anymore, and that's leading you closer to earlier death. So please understand, this is a very important concept, and I spend time on it because if you don't get this, then you may not understand the rest of the process of what I'm going to be explaining. So what does the science tell us about this idea of symptoms? People are taught that symptoms are the best indicator of health. Really now? Well, this is what the science tells us. Feeling versus function. So how you feel may not be the best way to measure how healthy you are. And that's because if we look at the system in our body that feels things, that's the nervous system, only 10% of the nervous system is devoted to feeling pain or feeling discomfort. Only 10%. The other 90% is running the function. And so the function would be how the nerve supply to the muscles is, like how the muscles are running, how the organs are running. And that's not about what you feel, that's about how you're functioning. And so we have to understand that if this is how we're measuring our health, is how we feel, we are ignoring a whole other range that we could be looking at that will tell us more about our health than just how we feel. So, and this is true for most common health issues, not just digestive issues. So when you think about cardiovascular disease, right? What are the early signs of cardiovascular disease? There are no symptoms. What about cancer, right? No symptoms early on. What about something like diabetes? No symptoms early on, or you won't feel it, right? How about even something like a cavity, right? By the time you're feeling most dental issues, you've got a much bigger problem. So if we wait till how we feel tells us whether there's something wrong and what we have to do about it, and then if we mask that feeling so we just don't feel it, we may actually continue to lose function as we go. So this is important because symptoms oftentimes, let me ask you, are they an early sign or a late sign that you have a problem? And so why are we taught to judge our health and manage our health by symptoms? That's where we get into trouble. Now, again, here's another problem, is that many people have this dangerous belief that drugs work, because in some sense they do, where if you have symptoms, you may have a drug that will manage the symptoms so you don't feel them, but it may not be correcting the cause. So again, all day long, we are being trained by the commercials and the ads that we see that symptoms, that drugs work to address symptoms. And so some commercials will actually tell us exactly what our solution is so that we can have the best life possible, right? You always get that wonderful husband and wife with the rainbows and the wonderful lifestyle. But here, check out, here's an example of a commercial, right? Here, if you don't recognize him, this is Larry the Cable Guy. Maybe you've even seen this commercial, Larry the Cable Guy, right? And he's standing in front of the colossal corn dogs. And this is probably at, a fairground, something like that, right? And so what he's doing, he's promoting a Prilosec ad about prevention. Now watch the subliminal message here, right? They're trying to sell a one-a-day over-the-counter of Prilosec to prevent you from getting reflux so you can just continue living your same lifestyle, right? Is anybody here offended in this insult to our intelligence here on something like this, right? Basically, this newlywed couple are enjoying all that life has to offer by preventing heartburn with a drug so they can continue to live a really crappy lifestyle, right? Do you see this? Now, can we all just agree that we just need to live differently than the message that this is sending, right? And if you did follow this, remember that even in the fine print, it does say you only want to use it for 2 weeks if you have heartburn. It's not meant to be taken ongoing, and yet they are actually promoting it as a preventative strategy. Take one of these a day and you'll have the best life possible. Really? All right, what would the side effects of this approach be? Check it out. Okay, headache, abdominal pain, irregular heartbeat, persistent muscle spasms, seizures, diarrhea. That's a digestive concern. Abdominal or stomach pain or cramping. Another digestive concern. Fever, blood or mucus in your stool, rashes, itching, swelling, especially of the face, tongue, and throat. Sounds like an allergic reaction to me. Severe dizziness, trouble breathing. Okay, so anybody want to get signed up for that? Okay, so if you don't like the idea of drugs, you could just try to ignore the symptoms. Okay, that's another dangerous belief. Your problems will just go away if you ignore them. Okay, who here has tried that, right? Do your problems get worse or do they get worse if you just try and ignore them? Look, we need a better way. And remember that if you want to get results, you have to take action. Ignoring it is not going to get, it's not going to bring you to the action step. But if in order to take the action step to get the better results that you want, we first have to understand what the problem is, right? So you may think taking a drug is an action step, but that's not necessarily getting to what the cause is. So we have to understand what the problem is, what the cause is. That's what the problem is, what the cause is. And then it will reveal exactly what the best solution is. But to understand the problem, let's lay some ground rules first. So we need a better way, and that means a better premise. First item in this better premise is that you were designed to be healthy. Healthy is normal. You are designed to be healthy. And if you are not expressing health, it's because something's getting in the way. Something is getting in the way, some sort of interference. And that interference can be just one of two things. It's either going to be a toxicity or a deficiency or both, right? And so if we just can reconcile what are the toxicities, what are the deficiencies, then we can get back on track to being healthy because healthy is normal, right? All right. And so again, you are intelligent. Every cell in your body has an innate intelligence that is always trying to move you towards health. Your body is smart and you're designed to be healthy. And that intelligence in every single cell is coordinated and courses through your body, through your nervous system. So your nervous system is the master system that is controlling everything else, including your digestive system. Nervous system is the master control of the digestive system. And that's what keeps you healthy and healing, is this intelligence that's in your entire body, using the nervous system to coordinate all that intelligence so that you have function happening in a healthy way. And your spine is the suit of armor that is protecting your nervous system. So your spine is your lifeline. Your spine is your lifeline. We're gonna unpack this a bit so that you can understand what your spine has to do with your digestive system, because it actually plays a very important role. And then finally, the important part of this premise is recognizing that modern life is unnaturally stressful. And in the past year, it's been more than 10x. It's already getting stressful every single year, but this past year has been a record breaker of stress. So now that we look at that, let's unpack this idea of stress so we can see stress is coming at us from 3 dimensions, right? It's not just mental emotional stress, thoughts, it's also chemical stresses such as toxins, and it's also physical stresses that can come with traumas, but also with sedentary lifestyle. So it's the 3 T's, thoughts, toxins, and traumas, that make up these stresses. And whenever we are stressed by any or all of these, our bodies will go through a natural stress response. So when we are stressed, this is the normal response of the body. And I want you to think about this idea of, okay, a tiger that you have encountered, right? And then the body's designed to have this stress response if a tiger shows up. And so the blood pressure will go up, the heart rate will go up, our muscle tone goes up, meaning we're getting ready to fight or flight, right? Fight or fly, fight or run away. And so again, blood pressure going up helps us to run more, faster, suddenly, to fight harder. Our heart rate going up is pumping the blood out to the muscles, right? Cholesterol is going to go up because it is a hormone. It is a building block for stress hormones. And we need those stress hormones to be flooding our system so that we are ready for that fight or flight. Cholesterol is also used for wound repair, very important. our clotting factors will go up because we're getting ready in case the tiger wounds us, that we can clot and heal that wound as quickly as possible. Fear and anxiety will go up because the stress hormones, such as epinephrine or norepinephrine, those are often linked to fear and anxiety, which keeps us on hyper alert, so that if there's one tiger chasing us, maybe there's another one, we better be ready, right? Now, insulin sensitivity is going to be downregulated. And that's because insulin takes sugar out of the bloodstream to get it out into the tissues. And if we have lots of blood sugar, then the insulin helps us to store that energy, store that blood sugar for another time. If a tiger is chasing us, we actually want to keep the sugar in the bloodstream. So we will actually downregulate the insulin sensitivity so that the blood sugar stays high. Now, also, our immune response is going to be downregulated. So that's an important one because certainly you would think if you got wounded, you would want your immune system to work. However, in the few moments that you're fighting the tiger, you want all your resources to go towards fight or flight. The immune system is a very expensive system to run. And so we actually downregulate it temporarily so that once we have finished the fight with the tiger, if we have wounds, then we're going to ramp that immune system back up so that we can then repair. But when we are in stress, acute stress, we're going to downregulate the immune response. Sex drive is going to be downregulated. Not a good time to make babies when there's a tiger around. Serotonin levels will decrease. Again, not a good time to sleep when there's a tiger fighting you. Again, that's going to interrupt those sleep cycles. Now, digestion also is going to slow or stop. There may be an immediate instant reaction of defecation to empty the digestive tract, but then chronic stress is going to slow all that down, right? Because in the moment when we're fighting the tiger, that we don't want to expend any energy on digestion, right? Again, we want to put all the resources to fight or flight. So again, this is important in regards to digestive concerns, because this is actually a perfect response for an acute stressor, but it is deadly if it's experienced as a chronic stressor, right? Doesn't this look like a heart attack waiting to happen, right? And so we understand now that stress is what drives chronic illness, because it was only designed to be there for a short period of time as an appropriate adaptive physiology. Okay, so again, if this is what is causing us to slow down digestion, let's look at how that works. So now we're going to do a little neurology 102, because really this system, the autonomic nervous system, it's one of the coolest systems. Because it's the one that controls all the viscera. All the organ systems are controlled by the autonomic nervous system. And so basically, I want you to think about this as like the gears in a car. We either have drive going forward or reverse going backwards. And just like in a car, you can't be in two different gears at the same time. You have to choose which one you're going to be in. So sympathetic is the fight or flight gear, right? It's for running the whole body, all of the organs when you have a tiger to fight. And then when that is not happening, then we have that parasympathetic, which is for rest, repair, digestion, reproduction, everything when there's no tigers around, right? And so if you imagine, again, this situation where you're down at the watering hole and the tiger shows up, boom, sympathetic nervous system takes over, and all those things we talked about, shutting down digestion, shutting down immune system, right? And we are either choosing to fight or to run. In the case of the water hole and the tiger, probably running would be the best thing, right? So you run back to the cave. You get back to the cave, you're sweating and panting, but then you're safe in the cave. And now is when you can either repair any wounds that you got, or you can just shift right back down into rest, digestion, reproduction, and so on, right? That's when you're safe, right? So again, think of this autonomic system as gas or brakes, and the relaxed state is what's needed for digestion to work. All right, so now let's just go back and review Neurology 101, which is just this idea of the basic nerve supply. How is it that the brain is able to run all of these organs? And it is through the nervous system. So remember, we have that intelligence that's in every single cell in the body, and that's all coursing across the nervous system. So basically we have the brain that is talking to the body and the body that is talking to the brain. And the conduit of how these messages get back and forth, it all has to go right through the nervous system, and that has to run through the spinal system. So you can see the brain sends the messages down to the top of the spine, and then the nerves come out and they go down to the organ systems through this venue. This is the vagus nerve coming right out of this top area where the brainstem is. Brainstem is where all the control centers are for all the organ systems, including digestion. Now, there are other nerves that come down the spine and go all the way to the bottom and also control the organ systems from the bottom of the spine. And so from the top and the bottom, that's where the parasympathetic rest, digest, healing nerves are traveling to control all the organs. And then in the middle of the spine is the sympathetic nerve supply, which comes out and goes to, again, all the organs from different levels. All right, so when the tiger's chasing you, the organs are being controlled from these nerves. And when there's no tigers chasing you, the organs are being dominated and controlled by the top and the bottom. Okay, so that's the neurology 101. Now, if we think of the spine as the circuit breaker of where the wires go out to the organ systems, right? Just like in our house, we have a circuit breaker. And so let's say that you came home and you found that one room in the house, none of the lights work and the TV didn't work. You wouldn't necessarily go around checking every light bulb. No, you go right to the power source. You go right to the circuit breaker to see where's the fuse blown that controls that room. So as chiropractors, we actually think of if there's some organ system or tissue that is not functioning, what's interfering with that function, we're going to actually go right to the fuse box to see what's going on there and see which switch has been blown. So remember that this whole spinal cord is being protected by the spinal column. And I want to just give you a little bit more detail here. I'm going to pull out my spine and I'm going to just stop screen sharing so you can see me. All right, so here is the spine. And so what we can see is that here's the brainstem right at the top. And the brainstem, again, is where all the control centers are. Here are the nerves that are coming out. And notice that these nerves are coming out from holes that are in between, made from between two vertebrae. So the disc is the spacer that separates the two bones and keeps that hole the right size for the nerve to have room to breathe as it comes through, carrying the messages from the brain to the body and from the body to the brain. So as long as the messages can travel from the brain to the cells and back again without interference, you get to be healthy. But if there's any kind of interference that occurs, right? So if you look right here, what's happening to this nerve, if there's any interference, that's what then can start to alter the function of the body. And it'll also alter the information that the brain is getting about the body. So if this is the nerve going to the stomach, the brain may not be getting accurate information of what's happening there and may be sending signals to keep promoting, create more acid because it's not getting the feedback that there's enough acid there. Or it may be sending messaging and this stress response that's happening may not be communicating properly. So I want you to just understand the importance of everything of how our body works is dependent on all the messages traveling through these tiny little holes. All your health and healing in your body has to have these messages free and clear, and these holes have to be the right size. So if you notice that that hole is going to distort if the alignment of the vertebrae is off. So this is what I mean by your spine being your lifeline, because it's protecting your nervous system. But in any suit of armor that we have, where is the vulnerable place in that suit of armor? It's in the joint. And that's where the arrow is going to get into the joint of the armor, right? And so this is where the danger can happen if there are misalignments. So it's only if the misalignments are there where it's going to be a problem. If everything is in alignment and moving properly, then it's not a problem. So I hope you understand that is the big idea. Whoops, let me get to sharing my screen again. And it's right over here. There we go. All right. We're back. Okay, great. So that is the big idea, that we need to have the information traveling from the brain to the body and back again without interference. Then you get to be healthy. But if there's any disturbance of the flow of messages, that's when we start to see breaking down in the body. So let's look at this subluxation then. So you have jarring of the spine or stresses that are happening. And what happens is the vertebrae misalign and they can put pressure on the nerves. You can get irritation of the disc as well. And so when there's joint misalignment, there's going to be soft tissue damage. And that is going to cause inflammation, which then also is going to cause nerve irritation, that inflammation in this area. Now, if this is getting irritated every time you move, it's going to irritate it more. So your smart body is going to spasm the muscles to lock this joint down, to just strap it down so that you stop the movement. But when you stop the movement, this imbibition is what's known as that's the name of the mechanism of how the nutrients and toxins get in and out of the disc. So the disc does not have a good blood supply. And so it relies on this technique, this mechanism of imbibition, which means that just like if you took a sponge and you squeezed it together and the fluid would move out, and then when you release it, the fluid is sucked back in. When you squeeze down on the disc with movement, that flushes the toxins out. When you release, it sucks the nutrients in. So if you strap down a joint in the spine where the disc is, and that stays strapped down for a long time, that's when the disc is going to actually start to wear down. And so that would not be a good scenario over time. And so when there is this joint fixation, the brain recognizes that this is not good for a long period of time. So it actually immediately sends an alert to the brain to let it know, okay, hang on now, we've got trouble here. We don't have proper movement here. And so the brain actually will go into having elevated stress hormones in the body and a global stress response. So a subluxation actually increases stress in the whole body. And if the subluxations are persistent, then it means we are now going into an ongoing stress mode. We already talked about the stress response should only be short term. And so recognize that you can have stress on your body from an outside stress, like emotional, mental stress, something like that, or it can be coming internally in the body persistently if there are subluxations, nerve interference. So even if you think you don't have stresses or you're managing those stresses in your life, the subluxation itself can cause a stress response. All right, so how would you know if you actually were having stresses caused by subluxations? We actually have technology that we can use to measure that. And so this is how we measure the effects of stress in the body. We have these the technology we use in the office, and we do have these systems right in our office to measure on people. This one on the left-hand side is the heart rate variability assessment. And heart rate variability is a great way to measure your nervous system's ability to process the current stress load that you have. And so if it is impaired, it means that the current stresses you're under, even if you think they're not that big, are actually causing a problem. Okay, I have to plug in my computer. Hang on a moment. My apologies. Nearly there. Okay, so that's an example of an interference that is a deficiency, electrical deficiency to the computer makes it shut down. So perfect to occur while we're talking about subluxations. So I want you to just, again, understand that the HRV is the way we measure whether there is a loss of the system's ability to process the current stress levels, an impairment in that. And so you see the green bullseye, that's where we want people to land. The white dot is where this person actually landed. And so their nervous system is impaired in its ability to manage their current stress level. Now, we also can see it shows parasympathetic and sympathetic. So we can actually see that this person is actually in a sympathetic state, even though the environment, when they're taking the test, there's no stresses in the room with them. But here we can see that their brain is actually still defaulting to a stress response. That's really important because that tells us what? Digestion is going to be impaired because they're in sympathetic dominance and they don't have the ability to manage the stresses that they're under. Now, we can also look at exactly where the stress patterns are in the spine and nervous system to see how it could affect certain organs. So everybody understands, I hope, that stress is what can drive chronic illness, but it shows up differently in different people. So some people, their stresses may affect them where they get headaches. Now, other people may get digestive concerns and so on. So this on the right-hand side, this is our rolling thermography assessment, and it actually measures the nerve supply that goes out to the different organs. So that C7 area, for example, is an area that controls the liver, the stomach, and that area down in this part also controls the gallbladder, the stomach, the pancreas, the liver, the small intestines is in this area. And then down the bottom, that's the large intestines in the lower bowel. So if somebody had this kind of irritation in their nervous system, then it's a good chance it could be starting to affect their digestive system. So this is so useful technology because it also tells us that which direction somebody's heading. So if someone had this kind of patterning, but didn't necessarily have any significant digestive concerns, I might still be concerned that that is something that's going to be heading their way unless we correct this nerve interference. All right, and so what are the things that cause subluxations? They're caused by certainly jarring of the spine, whether it's car accidents, sports injuries, those sorts of traumas. However, they're also caused by things like poor posture or use of devices and technology, right? Sedentary lifestyle. And these are the things that accumulate over time. So that's what's actually an important piece to understand, is that these bad habits and traumas and bad habits in life, they add together and it's cumulative. All right, and so now let's look at the first of our most common digestive symptoms or body signals, and that is chronic constipation. So in this case, remember that the stress hormones will slow down the digestive response. And so for some people, there's kind of a continuum of how people are experiencing constipation. Now, there are some people that it's kind of an on and off thing, and then others struggle with it as though it's their new normal, right? It just is this way. And I find it tragic when I hear of youngsters that actually don't have regular bowel movements and they just say, well, that's just the way I am. No, this is a serious issue. Again, just think of it. An engine is only as good as its exhaust system. If you block up the exhaust system, it actually is going to overload the whole engine and the engine's going to break down. So what is the problem that is happening with constipation? It's about the muscles, the tone of the muscles that move the food along in the digestive tract. So the digestive tract is a very sophisticated series of involuntary smooth muscles. And if we end up with tonal issues, remember, it's the nerves that control the tone of the digestive system, the nerves that control the movement of the food along the digestive tract. So at the very top, you think of mastication, chewing, right? Those are the muscles that we use to chew the food. And if we then swallow that food, that has both the voluntary muscles of us deciding it's time for us to swallow, but then there's involuntary muscles that will then carry that food bolus right down through the rest of the digestive tract. And so these are the very specialized tissues, and all of them being controlled by what? The nervous system, right? The parasympathetic and sympathetic are going to have an influence of how food is moving through the digestive tract. It gets to the stomach. The churning of the stomach is movement of the stomach, the grinding down of foods, breaking the foods down, the pH and the acidity of the system, the digestive enzymes. What is it that controls that? The nervous system. The liver and the pancreas that are the providers, where the digestive enzymes are secreted from. What controls those organs? The nervous system. And when we think of the health of the lining of the GI tract, the mucus production, The pH, what is it controls that? The nervous system. And then even drawing the nutrients and water out of the bowels to reuse again in the body. What controls that? The nervous system. So as food moves along in this process, if we have tonal issues, then we're going to have problems with constipation. So chronic vertebral subluxations that are impairing the nerve supply to the gut will result in chronic stress hormones, which then also slows down the GI tract and interrupts normal flow through the system. And so chronic digestive problems can show up for multiple reasons. And so that's why we always want to check the spine, because typically we find that constipation is associated with the chronic subluxations in the spine. And so there's often more to the picture than just emotional psychological stress that can slow down digestion. There's also stress on the nervous system that controls the digestive function. So with chronic constipation, these are the levels that we find are involved. The C1 to C3. So C1 is the cervical area. C stands for cervical. C1 to C3 is the part that parasympathetically is going to slow down things. And then L1 and L2, this is the upper part of the large intestine that's controlled here. And so this is where there can be a spastic kind of blockage, where there can just be spasming that happens there that slows it down from moving on through the rest of the tone. And then we find in the lower bowel, the L5 to S3 here, this part, this is where the bowel tone and motility is slowed down. And so we really look at constipation as a neurological issue here because of the nervous system really driving this concern in such a big way. And we oftentimes will find in children, it tends to be more of the upper cervical, and that may be related to traumas during the birth process and the stress that occurs during the birth process that then lowers the tone of the whole system. We get wonderful results for children that struggle with constipation. All right, and so now just please let me just say again that if any of you are struggling with this, or you know someone that does, or you have kids that struggle with this, then please reach out to us. And what I would like to offer to you is just either message us on Facebook, or you can send us a text to 802-985-9850. That's our office. And just put in the subject line gut talk, which tells my team that you are reaching out to us because you've watched this webinar, and that you are interested in setting up a conversation with me. So we can just schedule a brief period of time that we can kind of talk down through what exactly are your concerns and whether or not it would make sense for us to do a more thorough consultation with you. So we can just start by talking it through. What are you noticing? How long has it been going on? And the different factors that may be involved in your case, because I'm kind of going through an overview, but every person has different nuances and individual pieces. So again, please feel free to reach out. No charge to schedule a telephone consultation with me. I'd love to do that with you. So again, just reach out to us if we can help. Let us know. All right, now what about the next one here? And this is the irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, celiac, inflammatory bowel disease, right? So this is where there is inflammation in the GI tract all the way through. And remember, if we think of the GI tract, it's almost like a very sophisticated hose that has an opening at one end and an opening at the other end, and it's just a continuous hose all the way through. Now, this hose that has openings at each end, it's how we then take food and get it into our body. But if something were to go in one end of that hose and then come out the other end, it means it actually never got into our body. Now, we've all heard of the saying, you are what you eat, right? That's the way we usually think of it. But actually, that's not true. You could eat something, and if it never got absorbed into your body, that means it was never actually in you. And so it's really, the more truth there is, you are what you absorb. You are what you absorb and metabolize. That's actually what creates you. That's how you get the building blocks from your foods and can use them to build your tissue. That's how we can get energy to burn, so we can do all the functions that we need to do, right? So it has to get inside of us in order for us to use it. And that means it has to get into the bloodstream. So the walls of the GI tract this is it's called the lumen. The lumen is the lining of the GI tract. So if you think of a hose and you think of the inside lining of that hose, that's the lumen. And the health of the inside wall or the lumen is what's involved with any kind of an IBS or IBD situation. So let's look at the gut wall. So first off, I want you to notice just the big kind of the overall waviness to the surface here. And so the waviness is what creates more surface area. And then within the waviness, we have these finger-like projections going up and out, and those are the villi, the little fingerlings that will reach out into this environment where all the food is passing through, reach out to try and grab onto and exchange the nutrients in the water that comes through this tube and to get it into the bloodstream, right? So all these fingerlings increase the surface area even more, so we can be very efficient with this tube of getting as much surface area as possible to be able to absorb the nutrients in the water. And the thing that maintains all this, remember, is the nervous system. Nervous system is regulating all of this. So let's look at what was this human gut lining and digestive system designed for? What was it designed for originally? And we're going to have to look at our ancestral diets to really understand what it was designed for. And then we're going to compare it to our current diets, and we're going to see how we have gotten into trouble. So grains, if we look at the modern diet, we know that grains are a big part of that modern diet. And they really are not good for us. And the reason is that if we look at it, the long and short of it is this, that grains are seeds. Grains are seeds. And because they are seeds, they have a goal in life, which is to grow into a plant. So if you think of a tree, the tree drops the seed drops into the soil and gets destroyed. And it gets destroyed because it breaks it down so that it can then grow up into a plant, another tree, right? But until it drops in the soil, it actually has nutrients that are, it has substances that are anti-nutrients that will allow it to just kind of be dormant for quite a while, right? But once it gets into the soil, remember that soil actually is a very hostile environment, and it has fungus and it has predators that are going to come along and try to eat it while it's lying on the ground before it has a chance to sprout and grow into a plant. And so the seed actually has covering it these anti-nutrients. And so things like phytic acid or phytates or gluten, gliadin, right? The lectins, these are all there to try to persuade critters to not eat it because it's there. They get sick if they eat it because it actually will irritate the gut lining. And also it's there to be a toxin, right? A toxicant. A toxicant is a toxin, right? So that's the design of them. And so if you think of our ancestors, what did they eat? They didn't go around grinding up grains into flour and then eating that. No, what they would do is they would eat the animals that actually had the digestive system that could grind up the grains and turn it into something useful. So they wouldn't eat the grains, they would eat the meat, right? They would eat meat and greens, but not grains. And they would eat the meat that actually, the animals that could digest the grains. So they would eat the rabbit, and that's how they could get what valuable nutrients may be in grains. They would get it already digested in the rabbit. So the grains themselves are acidic. And if you may have heard that acidity in the body is what drives chronic illness. So grains are acidic. They actually have very low nutrient density. You have to get a lot of grains in order to get the nutrients out of them. And so that's what the cattle would be doing and the rabbits are doing, is they're taking this low nutrient density and they're actually concentrating it in their tissues. There's a high level of omega-6 fatty acids, and so that can drive us into being out of balance with our omega-3s, which is what drives inflammation. So grains will actually push an inflammatory state of the body. There's also the high glycemic index, so it floods the system, it spikes the blood sugar, which then starts to play with demand on the insulin, which then over time, of course, that is going to, chronic insulin being high is what's going to then create insulin resistance, which then is leading to diabetes. And of course, the toxicants are part of that. And so if we are eating these toxicants, then this is what can then lead to leaky gut syndrome. And one of the factors also is that just recognizing that even in the last 3,000 years, so even in our recent ancient cultures that didn't have chronic illness, but they did consume grains, the point was is that they consumed the grains in a very specific way. They always either soaked, sprouted, or fermented the grains. So basically they were simulating when that seed fell on the ground and broke down and started to grow into a plant. That's when it, as a plant, it could have been easier to eat because the toxicants would have been neutralized. And so ancient cultures would always soak, sprout, or ferment those grains in order to neutralize the toxicants, the anti-nutrients. And remember that the grains would have been part of an entire complex diet style of daily fermented foods, minimal sweeteners, no processed foods. And they certainly would not have been eating the modern hybridized grains that we have today, not to mention the GMO versions of these grains. And then if you add to it, the reason why these are GMO grains is so that we can then flood them with pesticides and herbicides like Roundup, otherwise known as glyphosate. And so our bodies were never meant to be taking in all the herbicides and pesticides as well. And the way that those pesticides work is animals that eat the grains covered with the pesticides, it destroys their gut, their digestive system, literally breaks down the lining of their gut. And so if we're eating those things, then it's going to affect it as well. And so us eating the way that we're eating is what's leading to leaky gut. So let's look at that a little bit more detail here. So we can see on the left side, so this is the top is the lumen or the lining of the gut. That's what is actually outside of your body, right? The foods are not in you until they're in the bloodstream. So down below, we can see the reddish part, that tube, that's the bloodstream. So when you see the healthy normal lining of the gut, it actually is acting like a filter, right? And it has a permeable aspect to it where it is able to choose what is going to get into the body. And so that's what's actually key here, is recognizing that the gut wall is a barrier from the inside that will protect things from getting into your bloodstream. So it's the barrier between the outside of your body and the inside of your body. Just like your skin is the barrier between the outside of the body and the inside of the body, very important for our immune system, for example. The gut lining also is that barrier. And so when we have these tight junctions, we have a very selective permeability of what we allow going into the bloodstream. So once food is properly broken down, and we would let in the breakdowns, the broken down parts, which would be things like the amino acids and the essential fatty acids, they would get into the bloodstream where we could use them for building and for energy, right? If, however, there were some pathogens in this lumen, in the lining of, or pathogens in the gut itself, then the lumen would actually help to prevent those pathogens from getting into the body as well. So the tight junctions are essential. If, however, we have things like the toxicants, the gluten and so on, that is going to now break this down. So if you think of this as a brick wall with mortar in between the bricks, when we have this inflammation coming from the way that we've eaten with the high levels of grains, as well as the pesticides and the toxins, then that's what breaks this mortar down. And now we're going to get not a selective permeability, but a leaky gut. And that leakiness is now going to allow pathogens in and food that has not been completely broken down so that we get proteins, full proteins coming in. Then that means the body's going to say, whoa, what is that protein? I don't recognize that. I would only recognize the amino acids as being valuable, but the proteins are not valuable. And so I'm going to now create a response to that protein because that is interpreted as a foreign substance. And so that foreign substance now is going to be a reason for us to create an immune response to it. So we're going to have swelling and inflammation, and then we're going to start to get inflammation in the body because all these things are flooding our system that are not supposed to be there. And so that can drive it through the whole immune system as well. Now, remember that also in the immune system, since we've got this close up here, the lining of the gut, 80% of the lining of the gut is where our immune system lives. So if we have inflammation in our gut, it's actually going to create a problem in the inflammation in the immune system of our whole body. And so when we have leaky gut syndrome, that also can lead to leaky brain syndrome, leaky kidneys, leaky blood vessels. And so this is where you want to recognize that subluxations that cause nerve interference can also drive weakness in the digestive tract as well. So it's a combination. And the glyphosate, I want to just unpack that a little bit. So glyphosate is actually the perfect storm that gets created. Now, when we think of our DNA, sometimes people will see an association. Oh, celiac, well, that's a DNA problem, that we have a we're genetically inclined to get celiacs. And so nothing we can do about it, it's just genetic. So please understand that in the uniqueness of all of us, I actually am doing advanced study in genetics and different courses. And one thing that it just shines so brightly to me is that 99.6% of us actually have the perfect genome to express perfect health as long as we have the right environment over time. And so in our uniqueness, we all have different genetic variants, and many of those variants actually were meant to be dormant unless there were certain circumstances that would show up. So we may have inherited a variant that actually should have been dormant, but we've altered our environment so much that many genes that would have been dormant in a healthy environment are woken up and turned on in an unhealthy environment. So it's those variants that may make people more vulnerable, but only because we have an environment that has now woken them up, so they're expressing. So there is that genetic factor. There's also those stressors, which are then creating the unhealthy environment that is triggering those. And then those stressors themselves are pushing the system and destroying the gut lining. And so when the microbiome, which is all of the microflora, the bugs, the healthy bugs, or actually the microbiome is all kinds of bugs. What we want is a healthy microbiome. So we can have an unhealthy microbiome where we have the bad bugs that are dominating that culture instead of the good bugs. So the lining of the gut also that's where a lot of the microbiome lives. Microbiome is everywhere in our body, on our skin, in our noses, in our lungs, in our gut, GI tract as well. So when we destroy the gut lining with grains and glyphosate, like Roundup, then the glyphosate creates that leaky gut, and it also makes both mercury and aluminum more toxic. And so that's how those heavy metals can also start to be affecting the brain and creating the leaky brain, and affects other tissues as well. So I wanted to bring that into our conversation. Many times children that are struggling with having mercury or aluminum poison, whether it's from vaccines or other exposures, if they have had glyphosate, that actually can drive things and make it worse. All right, and so there are solutions though. And so there's a product that is called, used to be called Restore, but it's called Ion Biome. They changed their branding. And Ion Biome, it's for healing the gut. And so what they found is that if they had a leaky gut situation and they used this substance, it actually helped all the cells that line the gut to start to actually heal that gut and create tight junctions. And it also was found to be protective, so that if glyphosate did get into the system and this substance that is in the Ion Biome was already in the digestive system, it would actually protect that system from breaking down. And so it helps to both heal and protect the system from leaky gut. And because the leaky gut then can affect leaky brain, we know that it also affects mental clarity. So remember that the human microbiome is not just bacteria, good and bad gut bacteria, but it's also viruses. There are healthy viruses and unhealthy viruses that will affect our microbiome. and then will disturb our digestion and our immune system. There's actually fungi that are part of that. There's yeasts that are part of that. There's even parasites that are part of our human microbiome. And there are healthy versions of all these and unhealthy ones. And so the lifestyle choices that we're making are what are going to cause a proper healthy balance or an imbalance. And if that microbiome is unbalanced, then it actually can create more vulnerability to the gut lining. So ion gut health is it helps to support a healthy gut, and which will then support a healthy microbiome, mental clarity, and actually protect you from toxins and from allergens that can create problems for you. And over time actually can heal, because the less that you have those allergens coming through in the leaky syndrome, then the more the body will be able to respond appropriately to the amino acids that it comes into the system. So again, it helps the immune function as well. And again, the old name for this was Restore, if you're familiar with it. So I love this product for people that are struggling with digestive concerns. Now, also I know that people will come in and they're at different stages of where they are at with their digestive concerns. And so again, we want to not just mask the symptoms, but we really want to do what it takes to heal the gut. And so if the microbiome is unbalanced, then one of the first things we may need to do is weed out the bad guys and seed the good guys. And so weeding out the bad guys, some of the substances or herbs that can help with that, we have one product called Gut Flora Complex, and that is made up of andrographis, berberine, oregano, and anise. The berberine itself is very useful. Sometimes I'll use just the berberine with some people. Myrrh is also a very powerful substance that will kill off things that shouldn't be there. So I use that in a very specific pulsed way in a rhythm. And then seeding the gut is with probiotics. So probiotics is where we start to just put in the good gut bacteria and the good whole, all the microbiome that is healthy for the gut. Now, if you're eating a diverse diet of healthy probiotic foods, things like sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, miso, apple cider vinegar, those are the kinds of things that have diversity, can support diversity in the microbiome by seeding the gut with those healthy ones. But once we seed the gut, we also need to feed the probiotics that we have put in there. We have to feed our microbiome. And so many times people are getting into trouble because they are sending down the foods that will promote the unhealthy parts of the microbiome to flourish. And then they crowd out the healthy guys, so the good guys and the bad guys. And so sugar feeds the unhealthy parts of the microbiome. And therefore the grains, same thing, they break down into sugar. So that's one of the things that can just keep pushing this unbalanced microbiome. So we want to feed the gut with the healthy sources for the good guys to get fed. And so fiber is important. Rosemary, green tea, grapeseed, and turmeric are all things that actually are very healthy for the good gut microbiome. And so we want to make sure we're feeding those parts. And now we also may have a lot of irritation and inflammation in the gut lining. So we want to heal that. And so there are things like licorice, chamomile, meadowsweet are some herbs that can help with that, along with aloe vera, and okra is a great food that is very soothing to the gut. And so we have some nutritional supplements that include these things as well. And then sealing the gut, fiber helps to seal the gut, healthy fiber, as well as ion. The ion biome product is helping to seal the gut as well, heal and seal the gut. So I hope that is useful for you. And again, we work with people on a very individual level where we're testing the specific nutrients and the specific supplements that are going to work best for them. And then we're watching the responses so we can dial it in for them as well. Just like the person I mentioned in the very beginning here that had those great results. So we went through the process with her of weeding, feeding, and healing and sealing the gut. Now, some people, if they're concerned about that genetic aspect, people that have celiac, for example, sometimes they may have those genes. However, it doesn't show up until later on in life. And so that's an example of how that gene may have been dormant, and then it may have gotten triggered and turned on by the poor environment that we were in, that was stressing the system. And so for people that want to work with me at the genetic level, we actually do a process called genetic-based nutrition. And we actually identify which of the genetic variants are upregulated, and then what do we need to do to reconcile that. And so with each of these variants, there, it turns out that there are some specific nutritional substances that need to be present in order to downregulate that gene, to turn it off so it's dormant and not expressing. And so we work with people at that level as well. So if you're curious about that, again, just text us gut talk, and we will have a conversation. We can talk that down. Now, that's all talking about supplements. What about just diet style? So remember, our ancestors would have had a very complex diet style that would have been promoting that healthy gut. And so we want to look at what are the do's and the don'ts. So we want you to do the do's and don't do the don'ts. So what are the do's? Non-starchy vegetables, some fruit, lean cuts of meat, poultry, and fish that are natural, meaning they're wild caught, they're free range, they're grass fed, and so on. The range fed eggs as well, natural fats that come from healthy animals or from healthy plants for us that we can digest. And so that would be things like olive oil, avocado oil, palm oil, coconut oils. Those are the natural oils. Nuts and seeds would provide some of those natural fats. And then, of course, the healthy animals would have the natural fats. And then drinking water as the liquid that we drink. That's the healthy do's. The unhealthy don'ts we want to watch out for are the refined carbohydrates, the cereals, the grains, the sweeteners, the bad vegetable oils, which is everything except for the olive oil, avocado, palm, and coconut oils, pretty much. The legumes, which have those, they have the leptins in them, which are the anti-nutrients that are part of that. Also dairy products, especially when they have been pasteurized and homogenized, that actually destroys the health of them and makes them unhealthy. And so there may be some raw dairy products that actually have a lot of enzymes and make it very much easier to digest those. So those may be in the do category for some people, but for people that are struggling with digestive issues, oftentimes the dairy products are not the way to go until the system gets much healthier, and then only the healthy dairy products. And then soda, juice, and alcohol, again, are going to be things that are just driving that inflammation in the body because of the blood sugar spiking, as well as just the toxins that are in alcohol. All right, so do the do's and don't do the don'ts. And again, that's just recognizing 40,000 years of genetic demands. It's just putting into your body what your cells demand. And now there's a book that I wanted to tell you about. It's called 1 Degree of Change. And it is one that was created by Standard Process. It's actually part of their Standard Process 21-day purification program, which people get so much value from. And I wanted to give you a gift for attending this webinar, which is you can actually download a free copy of this, an electronic version. And if you go to this link, my.standardprocess.com/literature/media/cookbook-purification.pdf. And so that's the place where you can download your own version of this cookbook. It's an awesome cookbook that has fantastic, pretty simple, straightforward recipes that are all going to be within the recommendations of the diet style that's going to be healthier. All right, so what are the subluxation patterns that we find with any of these irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, celiac, which is that inflammation right the way through the whole system? And we're going to see that it does include this C1 area, right? And that is the one that is the parasympathetic control of the digestive system. But then commonly we're going to see this T7 to T11 area right here. And this is, again, that sympathetic drive on these organs. And so, again, remember that when we have subluxations, it's a compounding effect. And if we want to prevent that and get back into healing and repair, we've got to make sure that these parts of the nervous system are healthy and healing. So C1 is the vagal tone in the healing. T7 to 11 is the midgut nerve supply. We oftentimes will find that diverticulosis, if that's something that you struggle with, that often is driven from this C1 subluxation pattern because it affects the whole tone of the bowels. And so we think of irritable bowel, IBS, IBD, Crohn's, celiac as more of a chemical version because we may have the subluxations here, but then we compound it with all the things we put inside our body that creates even more irritation in the gut lining. So, there's a lot of complexity to this, and I really just want you to have walk around knowledge for this rather than going into an exhaustive discussion of it. But if you struggle with that, again, just please text us gut talk at 802-985-9850 or just message us on Facebook, and we would love to sit down and discuss it with you. How about going again? We've started at the bottom of the digestive tract with the chronic constipation, the whole intestinal area, and now we're going up into acid reflux and heartburn. GERD is another way this is being described. And so this is now the upper part of the digestive system. And so again, looking at the anatomy, this is all about sphincters. Sphincters are the trap doors that are creating the one-way street that's going to protect one part of the system from the other. So right here is where the hiatal sphincter is, and that is a muscle that should close, like a trapdoor that should close, and it should be one way so that food that's coming down through the esophagus goes into the stomach and doesn't come back up. Because once it gets in the stomach, this is where the acid is that's going to further break down those proteins and fats. So it breaks it down, and that is very acidic. The stomach acidity likes to be about 4.3 pH in order to do its job well. And the esophagus likes to be 7.4 pH, so much more basic. And so if the trap door isn't working, then that's when the stomach acids can get up and start to irritate the lining of the esophagus that was not intended to be able to withstand that. And so it really needs to separate two distinct environments so that the stomach can then churn and not have anything splash up in to the esophagus. And that churning, mixing the food with the acids is what then breaks down the proteins and fats so that when it exits, so when the food is down here, you see this bolus of food at the bottom of the stomach, when that is all churned through, now it's ready to exit through the pyloric sphincter, another trapdoor, which then gets it down into the small intestines. And so again, we think of this as, and in the intestines, of course, is where there's further digestion and further absorption of nutrients and water as it moves through the rest of the small intestines. So in reflux, it's that sphincter being not working properly, and that is controlled by the nervous system. And so again, this is a tonal issue. And it's also, if you look at the subluxation patterns that it's related to, it's physical. And the reason we say physical is because this area of subluxation, this is driven by poor posture in our modern world. And so sure, car accidents and sports trauma could cause or start the problem, but computer slouch and forward head carriage, carrying the head forward, is one of the primary causes of this. So, if this is you, then you want to be taking action on this, and we want to be working with posture for someone like you. Very important here. So this is the area that controls the valve, T4 to T6. This controls the valve to that whole hiatal area. And so again, so important to look at deteriorating posture, hunching forward, as one of the causative factors that keeps driving and perpetuating this subluxation problem, which is then what is leading to the reflux. So, lots of people think that acid reflux is because they have too much acid in the stomach, when oftentimes that's not the trouble at all. It's that the acid is just getting into the wrong place. We want to have actually strong acid in the stomach to do its job to digest the food. If we don't, and if we're using medications that are lowering the acid in the stomach as a way to mask this or deal with it, it means that the proteins and fats are not getting digested, which means then they go into the digestive tract, the intestines, the small intestines and large intestines, where they haven't been digested properly. And that's where those proteins can get, then through leaky gut, can start to get into the body. So again, it can be a whole spiraling problem where you could have many digestive problems coming from this. All right. And so again, if any of you are struggling with this or you know someone that is, please reach out to us. We would love to talk with you about how we can help. Again, no charge to just have a a telephone consultation to really get an idea of what's going on for you. And remember, it is the micro traumas that are driving this. Look at how this posture is, and it affects all generations now. And I'm seeing it more and more in the younger generation, this whole idea of tech neck and the upper thoracic subluxation. So not only is it affecting the neck, but this is what's also driving the upper thoracic subluxations and indigestion. It's the most common when we see this poor posture. So most unhealthy positions are going to affect the viscera, including things like the lungs and the heart, because of that compression on those organs. And that's all day long. So this is what the modern person is turning into, is having these chronic digestive problems. And remember, it's cumulative, it adds together. And so it's not just a matter of, oh, I didn't have any traumas that could, or that trauma happened a long time ago. It's what's cumulative. And also just remember that if you have these subluxations from the past and nobody has been working with you to correct them, then they continue to drive that stress response. So if you're not sure, if you don't know whether or not you have subluxations, then it needs to be checked. That's the only way that you will know. And so in our office, we use many different levels of technology and criteria to determine what the health of the spine is, and therefore what the health of the body is. So we use the instrumentation similar to what I mentioned. We also have instrumentation that measures the muscle spasming that can be strapping down certain vertebrae, affecting the flow of messages. And again, the instrumentation tells us about the parts of the nervous system that you can't feel. So it's not going to be just resting on whether or not you have pain in an area. We're literally going to be measuring that 90% of function that's happening in the nervous system. We use motion palpation as well to feel, are there segments that are strapped down where there may be subluxations? And we're going to be looking at static palpation, literally which way are those vertebrae twisted or turned, and how that could be compromising the nervous system. Flow of messages between the brain and the body and the brain. Visualization of the posture is a great tool that we use because the posture is the window to the spine, and the spine is really where the nervous system is living, where those fuses can get blown, where the subluxations can occur. So, I mean, check your own posture, check the posture of the people around you. I guarantee that if you know people that are struggling with digestion, we're going to see that there are some pieces in their posture that are probably driving chronic subluxation patterns. So do that check. Like, you know, check out when you look at yourself in the mirror, when you look at pictures of yourself, do you see tipped shoulders and tipped head? Do you see that hunching forward that's happening? I mean, women hate that idea of having that hump, but I'll tell you what, we're seeing more and more of it now because of our lifestyles that are driving that. So we can't just try to correct we can't just correct the things that are driving it. We still have to correct the problem that has been started. So that's important. Now the x-rays are another tool we use to just look inside at the structure of the vertebrae. And the x-rays actually tell us how long a problem has been there. And so that can be very useful when we're designing a program to correct things for folks. So when people come to see us, we start by just talking to them, listening to their story, finding out what their health concerns are, what their conditions are, and what their sense is of what could have started this and what could have be promoting it. What are their body signals? And then, of course, we go through a very thorough analysis of how their nervous system is dealing with stress, whether there may be interference in the flow of the body's intelligence and healing, and ultimately the root cause of the problem. So we want to uncover what the root cause is so we can correct that cause and not just be treating the symptoms. So again, we get together to discuss the case, first gathering information, but then on the second visit, we report back to you exactly what we did find, answer questions, and give you recommendations on what is it going to take to get you to the level of health that you want. So clarifying what your goals are and what we can do to help with that. So all of this we are able to do right in-house. The technology we use is actually, you can't even find it at a hospital because there's no drugs or surgery that's going to correct the problems that we find with the instrumentation that we use. And that's why you don't find it in a hospital. But if you did, what do you think these kinds of tests would cost in a hospital? You know, $3,000, $5,000. I don't know if any of you is looking at what the costs of medical expenses are today. But in our office, we actually can offer this whole thing for $210 to get all of this information and to report back to you exactly what we found. And I also wanted to let you know that we also oftentimes will have specials that we run where we can cap the cost of it to $47 instead of the $210. So check in with us and see if we have any of those specials still remaining for the month. And if we do, we'd love to invite you in for that. If we don't, you're still invited to come in, and we can still get all the information to find out whether or not we can help. And again, if you just want to talk it down and see whether it makes sense for you to come in, then please, all you have to do is just text us, message us, and let us know. So what are the ways that we correct the cause of the problem? Well, we definitely have to address breaking the bad habits. So in our office, we want to actually uncover exactly what those bad habits are, and then what are the best practices that we can introduce you to. And so some of that might be that very specific tissue nutrients to rebuild the digestive organs so that they're going to heal faster. For some of you, we may want to work at the genetic level, but we can understand that once we get an idea of what your bad habits are and what you need to do to fix those. And then also we want to teach you specific exercises. So exercises that are going to strengthen the spine and actually reconcile that poor posture that so many people are getting into. There are even specific exercises for the different types of digestive concerns. So I'm going to recommend different things for people that have the acid reflux, because I understand the physiology that goes with that. So specific exercises, and then the chiropractic adjustments. So remember, if you already have the subluxations, breaking the bad habits doesn't correct the subluxations. And so the chiropractic adjustments are exactly what correct the subluxations. And we find we get our best results when we work in a program of care that retrains the nervous system and develops healthier strategies of running your body and adapting to stress more effectively. So again, remember, many people with digestive concerns are being told there's nothing that can be done. And so they just figure out ways to live around it and to tolerate it, of having very restricted diets and having to watch so carefully and still being miserable because things still aren't working. So how about you? Are you somebody that's been told that? Do you know loved ones that are just struggling and tolerating it? And remember that, procrastination is also the thief of health, right? Not addressing something over time, it can get worse. And then it may get to a point where help is not available. So you don't want to let yourself get into that level of disability where nothing is going to work. We want to actually get it as early as possible. So don't wait on this. Be an action taker, right? Procrastination is the thief of health. Be an action taker so that you can first find out what is the cause of your problem, and then what can be done to actually get resolution of that so you can have the best life possible, right? And that's what we all want, to be as healthy as possible. So share this with your friends and family. I'd be happy to have a conversation with any of your friends and family as well, so you can share with them the link to this recording of the webinar we'll have getting out to you. And also, of course, message us on Facebook, or just send us a text, Gut Talk, to 802-985-9850. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope this was useful for you. I look forward to sharing more with you again soon.